we are, lots of people joining. Very good. There we are. What a busy screen that is. Fantastic. Fantastic. Almost everybody is now in. Okay, those who are still waiting will probably be having connection issues, I think. So I think we'll start then, as we've got quite a few people in the meeting. Good morning, everybody, and indeed good evening or good afternoon, wherever it is, whenever you're watching this. Welcome to this next in our series of coffee break sessions with the Agile Business Consortium and JCURV. My name is John Williams. A couple of housekeeping points first. Can you turn your phones to off or to silent, please? Unless you're watching us on a phone, of course, in which case keep it on, otherwise you'll miss stuff. The toilets are wherever they are in your house, actually, I think for the moment. And there are no fire drills expected this morning. So if you sense a fire, please turn this call off and leave the building before you tweet about it. Okay. Right. My name is, as I said, is John Williams. And with us, as usual this morning, is Vikram Jain, who is the Managing Director of JCURV, the consultancy that does a lot of work with FTSE 100 companies in particular, helping them on their journey to agility. We're going to spend the next 45 minutes or thereabouts looking at the rather hard to get hold of concept of empowerment and what is needed to both give it and take it. Welcome, Vikram. You're going to guide us this morning, so over to you.
All right, thanks very much, everyone. Okay, yeah, so basically we were thinking of running a session just on empowerment for a couple of reasons. I'm just fired up my WhatsApp by accident. A couple of things that we've seen, especially in the last couple of months around empowerment is one, obviously, everyone's being forced to work at home, and you'll quite rightly all know that that's obviously been a stretch for both team members, but also leaders. Those companies that we know maybe have kind of been used to a bit of a micromanaging culture, suddenly having to be stretched and challenged around how they manage now, because you can't see your people, you can't be in front of their faces, all that stuff. And then the same thing from a team member's perspective is how do you now take more ownership, more accountability, more empowerment in terms of how operating, which is a big opportunity. And then there's obviously a broader theme here, which is that, you know, as change becomes more and more important and the speed of change is more important, empowerment is just so much more valuable as a concept now than ever before, because as ever, we need to use 1,000 brains rather than a few brains to kind of manage all the challenges the businesses are facing. So that's why we thought we'd kind of run this session on empowerment. And I guess that one of the key takeaways for us is it's not just, when we speak to a lot of leaders and organizations, a lot of the teams always go, well, you know, I'd love to be empowered, but my leadership team don't let go. But I think there's a lot of opportunity for us as team members to also do something about it as well. And almost our perspective here is that I think we can take more control of the level of empowerment too. So that's what we want to cover off today. I hope that works for everyone. And so we've kind of got three objectives. One is that we just kind of learn some basics around empowerment. Second one is kind of, we thought would be a bit of an interesting one, and I'll personally take an action as well, is to see whether any actions that we can take out individually to strengthen either our level of empowerment or how we empower others. And if it's interesting and valuable to you, we're going to share with you a tool which we use to support our clients and coaches on kind of managing that journey as well. Hope that's all right. So, and obviously it's going to be interactive as ever. So what we'd love to kind of get your views on initially, and we're just going to share a link, is that first of all, why do you think that empowerment is an important thing? So I think you're going to get a link, and if you can just ping out your one-word answer to that, that'd be really, really cool.
Hopefully everyone can see the link in the chat.
Trust agility, right? There's that one word. Oh.
Mm.
That's brilliant. Okay, so you can get the gist. I guess what are the benefits from all of this stuff then is people talk about ownership, people talk about performance, success. That's pretty cool. Okay, so there's so many benefits clearly of kind of the concept of empowerment. And it is a simple word, but obviously it is complicated to do, and especially in large, complex organizations with lots of different people with lots of different levels of capability, and styles of managing or managing themselves as well. That's really cool. So, yeah, brilliant. Okay, so what I just quickly wanted to walk you through then. So what we're typically seeing, I guess, from a team member, as you quite rightly say, there's lots of benefits. It's satisfying. You get to learn more because you're now taking more ownership and you're doing the thinking on the behalf rather than just waiting to be potentially told what to do. A lot more fun, a lot more motivational as well. And then I guess from a leadership perspective or a corporate perspective, it's brilliant to do this because ultimately, as you've said in that word cloud, you're going to get better performance. Actually, you'll get more commitments. And there's a brilliant, if anyone reads the applied psychology, there's a 350-page piece of research, which I had to remind myself of it yesterday. But, they've done some research which is statistically significant to show that empowered organizations will deliver greater performance, greater levels of commitments, and in this case, improve retention, which is a massive issue when we've got a massive talent challenge, in all the industries we operate in, and obviously greater levels of satisfaction. So a lot of win-win for both the person who's been empowered, or the empowered person, as well as the corporate as well. So what we're going to cover off, and I'm sure lots of you have either watched the video or have read the book. We're going to cover off some brilliant work which is done by David Marquet. So yeah, David Marquet, who's an ex kind of submarine commander, who kind of covered off, he did a really successful book, which is all about what he did practically on empowering his team on his nuclear submarine, and what they achieved is some truly exceptional kind of things. So if you've read the book, that's brilliant. And what you'll see from what he was saying is that what are the key components of empowerment? And in this case, he talks about kind of making sure that as a team that you have, or as a team member, you have absolutely clarity of what you're expected to do. Okay, so you're really, really clear on what you're expected to do. The second thing is all about control. So it's being able to have the ownership or take ownership of the challenge in order to go and address it. And then the last thing they talk about is capability as well. So you actually have the competency and the skills and capabilities to do the actual role. And having all of those things in place will kind of help you increase the level of empowerment that you have. And as a leader, those are the things that you need to be focusing on in order to increase your level of empowerment to the teams as well. Okay, so those are the three components that he kind of introduced. And what was quite interesting then is he kind of overlays this against kind of a journey. So I think, personally myself, when I looked at this for many years, you think, well, empowerment's kind of, okay, right, I'm empowered or I'm not empowered. But what really lovely concept that David Marquet introduces is this is a continuum, almost to say, well, if you put kind of control on one axis and competency and clarity on the other one, there's kind of levels which can be developed. It's like a muscle, really, of which can be developed over time. And the key thing here is it's not just a binary thing. You don't just go from being disempowered to empowered. It's a muscle that you have to build. And almost we have to be conscious of it. So in his view, as an example, what he says is that you don't want to be in a position where you give a lot of control away, but your team has either low levels of competency or don't really have the clarity in what they're trying to achieve. Okay, and obviously there's some downsides of that, which is probably you got a lot of chaos. Okay, a lot of people say, yeah, you go off and do some stuff, but they don't know what they're trying to achieve, and they actually don't have the skills to do it. And I've seen it. I've been in situations where that's happened. On the other hand, and we see this a lot, is that you've got a really competent team who know what they need to do, but then you have potentially a culture or a leader which doesn't want to let go. And ultimately you get a lot of frustration in the teams as well. Yeah, hopefully, I'm sure people have seen kind of that kind of environment. So what kind of David Marquet talks about is there's this kind of a nice sweet spot. Okay, so, you know, you want to be operating in that middle level where you slowly give control away, but you're building the competency and clarity as you go along. And the more control you give away is basically related to how much competency and clarity that you can build as you go along as well. Okay, and it's, as I said, it's a muscle. So you get, the better you are at kind of providing that clarity, building the capabilities of your team, the more control that you can give away as well. Yeah, and how we broke this down further then is in two different kind of angles. So one, he said, okay, so as a team member, you know, this is let's just have a look at kind of 7 or 8 kind of different characteristics. So as a team member, those people who are operating at kind of low situation, they're almost in that space where they're saying, look, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. Maybe I'm not necessarily competent, and my leaders aren't letting go. So I'm in a position where I'm just saying, tell me what to do. Okay. So I'm hit with a problem. I'm just going to immediately default to tell me what to do. Quite an disempowered kind of statement. Then you kind of move up the curve to the point where maybe you're thinking, right, actually, I know I've got some competencies. I actually know I'm educated on what to do in this space and I've got the experience. So maybe I can get to the point where I'm in kind of level 3 where it's saying, okay, I recommend. So I've been hit by a problem, but now I'm saying, right, these are the 3 options that I think we could go with. And I'm recommending these 3 things. What do you think? Okay. All the way through that maybe you're highly competent, got a lot of clarity, and your leaders have kind of, you know, maybe you've been given a lot of control. You're in the position where you're saying, look, I request permission to, so I've made a decision, and now this is the kind of the point at which this is the direction I want to go in. I intend to, or I request permission to, and maybe you get to the level where you said, I've done it, or I've been doing these types of things as well. So that's kind of the levels almost that you can almost start thinking about, where am I in this thing? Now, inversely, if you have a look at from a leadership perspective, this is what the leaders can be saying. So do this, do that, you know, so just telling people what to do. And obviously, you know, you can get to the point where hopefully as you're trying to empower teams, you can get to the point where you say, okay, well, look, what do you recommend? So you're actually trying to get the teams to take more ownership of the decision making, take more ownership of of their end goal themselves. To the point where, you know, these are very good coaching questions. They're open-ended and putting more of the control and empowerment onto the teams. So what do you think? What do you intend to do? What have you done? What have you been doing? Okay, so that's when you get really quite advanced and you're just now checking in on them about what's happened in the past rather than what's going to happen. And now you're just doing, almost you could be saying, okay, well, what did you learn based on all the stuff that you've done? Okay, hope that makes sense. So you can see empowerment is not just a binary thing. It's generally a continuum, and it needs to be developed as you go along. Okay, and you don't want to, as we went back and before, if you just quickly give it away without necessarily building up the strength and the 2 or 3 kind of key components, you can actually result in chaos or frustration. So the other thing to think about empowerment then is if we just put all those kind of 7 layers between what it's like as a team, what it's like as a leader, what we see is that, you know, what you want to be, if you think from a leadership perspective, is the leader always wants to be kind of one rung ahead of where the teams think they are. So if the teams are in the position where they're saying, look, I think we need to do this, the leaders should be kind of almost asking the next rung up of questions, which is, okay, what do you recommend? Because that's providing the stretch, that's building that competency to take, you know, to build the muscle in the team to think more. And then as you go up the rung, where you can start saying, okay, well, I think the teams are in the space of they're making really good recommendations, then now you're saying, okay, what would you like to do then? So you're now going from, okay, I've got 3 options to okay, I'm providing one opinion on what I propose to do. Okay, so that's where we think about kind of empowerment. It's genuinely a continuum. It's a muscle that we have to develop. And what we'd love to hear from you guys now is 2 things. One, where do you see yourself as a team member in one instance? Where are you on that continuum? Are you in the space of, basically you've been, you tell me what to do, I intend to, you're providing recommendations. And then the second question we've got is that where are your leaders? Where's your manager? Where's your boss? Where's your leadership team in the kind of the right angle of that leadership ladder? So I think we're going to share with you a couple of...
I've just shared a link for the first question as a team member.
And again, we'd love to kind of hear where you are on that.
And then I'll also share the second link now as the leadership team.
So there's actually quite interesting. So there's a bit of a range here. What's good is that we're not this community of 50 odd people. We're not a bunch of disempowered people. And actually we've got, we're in the space where we're taking ownership, we're taking accountability, and we're making recommendations about how we deal with our opportunities and challenges in our role. And I think what's really positive about this is that there's a lot of strength in terms of people who are in the position of where they're fully empowered, which is really, really amazing. John, have you got any other reflections on that?
Yes, actually, it's very interesting because I guess it's not surprising to me that we see a relatively empowered group responding here to this, because I think almost we're a sort of self-selecting group in a lot of ways for this. However, what is really encouraging is the fact that almost half are right at the top of the scale. And I think one of the things that's quite important here, because if I think about where I am, I probably move mostly between 5 and 7. So depending upon where I am in the process or the project, I might be at I intend to do this and checking it out with people, and then moving on and getting a bit more confident maybe later on sometimes. Very interesting spread.
Yeah. And obviously, there's ideally where we want to be in the long term is kind of operating kind of like in the upper levels in terms of 4, 5 to 7. But of course, sometimes it's fine to be in the point where you're just saying, look, I recommend. I did that with a team yesterday. I was making a recommendation of how I was going to run this session today, so I just wanted to make a recommendation. So I wanted to gather other people's perspectives rather than saying, look, this is the answer, this is my view, or I've done it. What do you think? So obviously you can adjust it accordingly. But ideally, where you can increase performance of your organizations, increase performance of your teams, is when you're operating at that level. So I think that's amazing that, it's really good to see kind of so many people are operating at such a kind of mature level. So let's have a look at where we are from a leadership perspective then. So we had a hypothesis as a team just before we started to say, I wonder where our leaders are in this space. And I think we're probably kind of fairly validated. We thought it would be more mixed. We thought it would be more mixed. And I think actually I'm surprised. I thought it would be. I thought it was going to be more in the 1s and 3s actually, but it's a much more balanced approach, isn't it? In terms of why that's the case.
Vikram, we just had a question on the chat to say, what's the difference between 4 and 5? Which is a good question.
Yeah, very good question. But that's because I did make a recommendation with my team where we ran it. That's a good point. So actually, just going back to it, really, 4 was supposed to be saying, what would you like to do? And 5 was supposed to be focusing on what do you intend to do? Yeah, so maybe just a stronger statement, because you've got an intention to say that's exactly what I'm doing, rather than kind of a slightly looser, and I think I want to do this. Okay, but well spotted, eagle eyes. Yeah, but it's really interesting. And obviously, as we talk, the more we talk, the more disempowering the leaders become, actually. And this is quite common, obviously. And this is one of the things which, you know, we need to ultimately, as change agents, we need to take accountability to help our leaders through this process. And that's what you guys are obviously doing really well. There's a big journey to be taken, obviously, there. That's fascinating. It's really fascinating, isn't it? And as you know, if you saw the 14th edition of the Agile State of Agile reports, naturally, you know, culture, behaviors, and leadership comes up always as the kind of most significant impediments to Agile transformation. So this kind of, again, kind of illustrates that. Okay, so let's have a look, if you stop sharing, Michael. So what we wanted to do now is just introduce you to a little tool that we use with our teams. And I don't know, this is just one of many. And actually, those who've kind of read the David Marquet book, it does kind of force you to ask questions, which is, okay, how do I go around doing that? And there is a workbook underneath his, in his major Turning the Ship Around book, which kind of takes you further, but you've got to almost dig a little bit. So we've kind of put together a very simple kind of approach, which you could use with your teams, which you could use with your, maybe as a leader, to help kind of you on developing your skills and capabilities, or to use as a coaching tool as well. So kind of the 4 steps that we typically kind of take is 1 to 5. So the first step on the top left of this canvas is to kind of map where you are on the empowerment ladder. And as you guys have probably identified, you're kind of operating between 3 and 7. And the recommendation here is that then we go to step 2. So step 2 is then to say, okay, well, if you're currently at I recommend or I think, the goal, which is recommended, is to say, okay, well, how are you going to get to the next level? So we don't try and jump too far, because we need to kind of build the muscle. We don't want to sprain ourselves, so to speak. So you almost want to capture, okay, right, today I'm at think, and now I want to be, or going forward, I want to be in the recommendation stage. This second step is all about brainstorming. What are all the things that are going to help me get to that recommendation stage? So this is just a very simple kind of worked example, but you know, this is one example with someone we were mentoring. Kind of from a clarity perspective, they were going to, you know, maybe they were going to go and speak to their leaders, a brainstormed idea, and actually find out what are the specific goals of that particular team. Or from a competency perspective, and this is quite common, this particular person said, I want an outcome I want to achieve to get to that recommendation stage is that I believe that I have an opinion which is valid. Okay, so that's the confidence thing. And the other, I thought I really like this one, is all about I accept that it's okay that one of my recommendations is not taken forward, because there's that fear that if I kind of put myself out there, I might get rejected. Okay, so those are the kind of outcomes that they were brainstorming. Then we get into kind of steps 3, which is then saying, okay, well, okay, if those are all my backlog of items which are going to help me get there, okay, in the next 30 days, what am I going to do? So in this case, they said, I'm going to observe how my colleagues make recommendations to help build my confidence, to kind of learn how other people do it. I'm going to make structured recommendations to my manager. So I'm going to take action, and I'm going to take 3 ideas to my boss based on what I think is right, and I'm going to see how it goes. And actually the third one is, and this is taking ownership of our own empowerment, I'm going to organize a meeting with my manager to provide recommendations and explain my development goal. So it's almost saying to them, look, at the moment, this person was going to go to the manager and say, look, I'm just going through this, there's a real benefit for me of being more empowered because, I think it will add more value to you or help me more motivated, et cetera, et cetera. And they almost walk them through the ladder. And at the same time, they kind of get them to buy in and support them in doing that experiment as well. Okay, so effectively they come up with a kind of 30-day goals or 30-day kind of experiments. And then what we've got then is to say, at the end of the 30 days, we can almost then map the progress in terms of how have I done. So, you know, I observed a couple of people on what they've done, and actually we've captured then on 5, what are the learnings? So there's some really good examples of how they've constructed the problem and then defined the opportunity in a really logical way, and so on and so forth. So there's some really nice kind of ways that they learnt from the approach, and they then, at the end of 5, they can say, okay, well, based on where I've got to, based on my learnings and reflections, I think I'm getting to the point where I'm in the recommend phase. Maybe I need to then redefine my goals, go back to step 2, and then start focusing on kind of I request permission to, etc. Okay. What we'd love to do is, because I think it's always good, we can always be better, is to think about individually, is either putting yourself as a manager or a leader, or putting yourself as a team member. What are your 3 things that you'd do in the next 30 days? So maybe work on step 2 and step 3. What are the 3 things that you'd do differently to strengthen your ability to be empowered yourself, or to be empowering of others as well? So again, we just wanted to give you kind of 5 minutes to have a think about that. And then what we'd love to do is hear from you in terms of your perspectives on what we talked about today. And also, if there's anyone who wants to share some of the things that they're going to do, that'd be really, really privileged to hear. Okay, does that make sense to everyone? If you've got any questions, let us know on the chat. So really just, we want to have a think, what are the 3 things that you do differently? Where are you right now? Where do you want to be next? And what are the couple of things that you're going to do differently in the next 30 days?
Vikram, there was one question on the chat from Sandeep saying, if someone's at a level 7, can this tool be used to ensure that they stay there?
Yeah, well, for sure. I mean, I think then it's that, well, how do you, if you're at that level, then, you know, how do you maintain it at that level? How do you even get better? Because, no one's perfect, obviously. So I'm sure there's learnings that you can take, which you can say, well, maybe there's a few challenges. You could do a retrospective ultimately on yourself and say, what are the opportunities to improve? And I think the other learning is that, you know, because our systems are constantly changing, you're going to be dealing with different people, different challenges. So I think sometimes maybe one boss that you may have is really empowering, and another boss maybe a different management style, maybe a little bit more micromanaging. So maybe you're going to have to learn different ways of influencing them as well. So I think it should be constantly dynamic.
And then there's a request, Vikram, to say, can we have a look at the larger picture of the diagram rather than the example? Of the diagram being the top left one? I think so, yeah.
I can go back. So let me just quickly go back to, if maybe this one's easier, if you want to use the left or the right one. So give you a couple of minutes, and then we'd love to hear kind of your reflections. And John, I'd love to hear your reflections as well, because
which you'll be able to do when I unmute myself. This is really, really interesting. Actually, I think the map, the picture that has the matrix, the chart on it, and the sweet spot, the diagram is probably, the big version of the diagram is probably better for me because I'm more visual. That sort of stuff for the team member, because I think a couple of things that stand out for me on this in deciding what 3 things I will do to get me from where I am to where I'm going to go. First of all is identifying actually really where I am, and that's about being honest with myself. And I like that example that you gave about somebody wanting to believe that they have an opinion, because I think actually we're not very good at identifying much about our own selves, about our own personalities, and particularly in a situation like this, we're talking about engaging with a boss, with a line manager, which is almost by definition sometimes a challenging interaction. And I think starting from the point where we say, okay, normally I would just tell them I'm going to do this. If I'm really honest, I should be saying I think, or I recommend. And I think the starting point there is total honesty. And I think that's the basis on which the clarity and then the competence and the control can actually be garnered. I think this is the beauty about this for me, is the simplicity of it. It's really straightforward and simple, and it's a very complex concept reduced to something, distilled to something which is easily applicable.
Yeah, yeah. And I like the framework in terms of it really allows you to have a upward conversation. So kind of almost reverse coach your boss and saying, look, this is, I really want to help you, help you deliver more value and all the other bits and pieces. And, look, there's a win-win here and I want to go that way. And, can you support me?
Actually, just picking up on that, because that's when I first saw this, I was reminded of situational leadership, just the application of leadership in particular ways to particular situations, and I thought this, in a way, this gives two more dimensions to situational leadership, because it talks about, as you just mentioned, the idea of actually sort of managing upwards, if you like, really. So it's applying situational leadership from me to my boss rather than the other way around, which is quite a sophisticated mindset to have. But then actually in the middle of that is saying to myself, actually, I need to apply this sort of, as I said, the clarity, the honesty, the situational leadership to myself as well. So this, for me, this is a much deeper model than something like situational leadership without being more complicated. I like it.
Yeah. Okay, so hopefully, would anyone love to either share some of their perspectives on what they'd look to do differently in the next 30 days, or throw out a question or a perspective on kind of empowerment. So if you want to unmute yourself, it'd be great to kind of have a discussion. I'm sure there's some non-shy and retiring people out there.
Everybody's at level 1, you see. Well, actually, I've just seen a really interesting question on the chat, which is, how do you handle overconfidence and misperception? That is somebody rating themselves incorrectly if you're doing this with a team. Good question. Vikram, what do you think?
Yeah. I mean, how do you handle overconfidence? Well, I think ultimately you've got to let them experiment, right? So there's two approaches that I've seen. One is that you could almost tell them, no, I think you're down. Or the other one is, hey, it's a 30-day experiment. Go and try it. And maybe they think that they're really competent at doing a certain job, and then they'll reflect at the end when it maybe has or hasn't worked, and then they can get on that continuous improvement loop. A friend of mine's just been doing a house renovation. It was interesting. I got a text from him last night, and the leader of the projects was desperately trying to get kind of more ownership and empowerment in terms of making decisions to take on that project. And ultimately, they've made a mistake and they've basically laid a load of underfloor heating in the wrong place. Now, one, you could beat them up or tell them, give them feedback, but he's never probably going to do that again. Now he's going to go through that learning loop because he needs to build his competency up about checking the drawings before he does it. So I think, personally, I think you should all allow people to kind of go on their learning journey rather than telling.
I think that's really important, because there's a balance here to be struck, and there's an old phrase which I always liked, which is, what would you do if you were not afraid? And I quite often think that, if I don't know what to do, well, what would you do if you were not afraid? Actually, we still need to apply that honesty to the answer of that question, because if I wasn't afraid, I might say, right, okay, I'll bid to be Prime Minister. Actually, that's frankly not very realistic. So we do need to identify not only where we are on this sweet spot curve, but actually be realistic about how far we want to jump.
Yeah, exactly right. Exactly.
Just on that question about giving people kind of falsely ranking where they sit, I think it's a leader's responsibility as well to continually communicate with their team, so that you're not just leaving someone to kind of make their own decisions, that even if you fully empower someone and give them control, that you are continually checking in, you're making what they're doing as transparent as possible. And then also you think about those, the empowerment triangle that you shared, Vikram, that the giving control is built on competency and clarity. So if you as a leader are aware that you need to build up competency, then you shouldn't be giving too much control to certain team members. So it's that spectrum and understanding about that. Yes, you want your team members to be pushing the boundary of taking on more control, but if you're conscious as well that they don't quite have the capability yet, then that should also kind of inform your decision making about how much control you do give.
Actually, that's very apposite in the context of agility, Michael, because the self-organizing teams are one of the basic characteristics of an agile organization. It looks like self-organizing teams should not mean the same as a team left to its own devices.
Yeah.
Because self-organization is not a natural tenet of human behavior.
Yeah. Well, again, going back to it, it's quite dangerous doing that way, which is why you have to strengthen the other legs of the stool in a way. Someone's mentioned about creating, I think, psychological safety. I think that's really important. And linking back to what what the other question was about, which is, how do you kind of inform someone if they're, almost misaligned in terms of what they think? I think it is really important to allow people to kind of learn and make mistakes. I think, and that again, if you're a leader, change agents in this space, the way we should set a coaching conversation up when we use this tool often, and we say, look, in the next 30 days, it doesn't mean that you're going to be successful. Maybe you've thrown out 3 recommendations and all of them got rejected, and now you're feeling really bad. But it's all about encouraging people to go, well, it was safe. At least you didn't do that after 4 months worth of work and pitch out a couple of recommendations. You've done it in a very kind of frequent and hopefully low impact and safe way, really.
It's Russell here.
Hey, Russell.
Hi everyone. Just to building on that, actually, I think there's the capability point. Are people more or less capable than they realise, but also confidence. So people might be more empowered than they think or than they kind of behave. Certainly, if I think to my direct reports, I've got 1 or 2 that would quite openly say, like, listen, I'm thinking about doing this left field thing. Just, is that okay? Or am I being silly? Whereas there's others I know that are probably more likely to be kind of holding back ideas. So even a simple, right, okay, why don't you just say, like, is there anything you'd like to just explore or just test the water on that might be kind of, you might think is crazy, but let's just go with it. Just to encourage those people that naturally might be less kind of back or more backward in coming forward into behaving in a more empowered way.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Russell. Yeah, absolutely. And actually, just a slight kind of a tangent on that one is we worked with a bank, and I think it was the first time almost the teams were given the empowerment. And what was really interesting is that the teams were in charge of developing new products. And when the leaders let go and said, right, you guys go and figure out how you're going to design it, build it, run it, the first immediate reaction of the delivery team was to say, well, we need to set up a steering group where you can sign off on our decisions. And the leaders looked at us and they're like, what the hell? Hold on. I thought we were supposed to be empowering them. Why are they now trying to build the governance? Almost the disempowering kind of bureaucracy that we're all kind of trying to get rid of. But I think, again, it just shows that you can't do it all in one go. You've got to build that muscle over time. And that's what we kind of said to the leadership team. And so we did kind of take away that kind of that bureaucratic kind of steering group in the end. Does any other people want to share either perspectives on being empowered, challenges they're facing, learnings they've had? We could even share it can share it just on the chat.
There was a good question on the chat, Vikram, about what do you do if you're too empowered, if your boss or leader almost absorbs responsibility, doesn't give that input.
Yeah. Okay. So then you've got like almost like negligence in a way, and I think that happens quite a lot. But what's quite interesting is I think it's actually it's highlighting the challenge of clarity, because now what you've got is almost a chaotic team which is running off potentially without any control at all or direction. And if the world's changing at the leadership team level, then how are they going to be kind of provided the right direction? I think so. Again, going back to it, we take accountability, we go back to the team, and we should be doing that kind of, okay, we're intending to, what do you guys think? And almost trying to remind and bring the leadership back into the mix. Okay, look, so I think we've only got kind of 5 minutes left. So as I said, the objective of this session was really just talking about empowerment, talking about kind of why it's important, and hopefully just introducing a very simple tool which we use, which again may or may not be useful to you. I hope it is. We've got if you go to our website, we've got a point of view which we've developed around this area, and also the canvas that we shared with you is also kind of available on our website. So you're very welcome to use that and kind of play around with this as well. That's it really. So John, I don't know if you've got any other final thoughts.
Vikram, I think you've got one more slide to go through.
Okay, oh sorry. One more. Just a reminder, I think. Sorry, just one more, there we go.
Perfect. So let me just talk about the State of Agile Culture survey that we're doing. So as Vikram mentioned, I guess culture and behaviours are cited as a key impediment that we're all having to bump into and face and try and navigate our way through. So we've partnered with ABC as well as Truthsayers, and we now we've launched a survey which happened on Monday. Hopefully you've received the news on it. If you haven't, I'm going to share a link so you can actually contribute to that survey. And really what we want to do is deep dive into which aspects of culture and behaviours are the challenges, to give us those insights to then help us as a group of practitioners that are working with agile ways of working every single day to try and help us by saying these are some of the big themes across organisations, different sectors, and we're really excited about sharing those results with you. One of the things that make this survey a bit different is that we're actually using neuroscience technology to help us drive out what people think to what people feel. And so we really feel that this is going to be really insightful once we've got the results. And amazingly, we've had close to 400 people fill out the survey in the last 2 days. So please copy and paste that link. It will take you 5 to 7 minutes to fill it out. And it's gamified in the approach. So it's worth a try even for that reason. So thanks.
Brilliant, thank you, Payal, and thank you very much indeed, Vikram. That was great, actually, and a couple of points that came out of this really, really strongly for me. The first one is that empowerment is not the same as abdication. The point that we were picking up at the end there is actually we just don't sort of throw the responsibility, the accountability and everything else, and often not the authority onto the team or the individual. At the same time, we do need to take responsibility for our own careers, especially as we get further up the ladder. And the word cloud brought this out really strongly, I think. That needs to be based on a principle of trust, which of course is fundamental to agile behaviors anyway. Trust between the team and the line manager, between individuals and line manager, and between individuals and each other. It also means we need to be able to trust that the expectations placed upon us when we are given or when we take empowerment can be achieved one step at a time, rather than suddenly saying, okay, as of tomorrow, I can be somebody really, really, really effective in ways in which I've never done work before. So one step at a time, and trying, and this is one of the bits I liked most actually, trying to ensure that our leaders are at least one rung up the ladder. Maybe not more than one, but at least one rung up the ladder from us. I think that was an absolutely fantastic session. I'm going to run a quick poll to see how people felt about that and whether or not you would recommend this poll to your friends. So the poll is now launched. So if you can see that on your screen, please respond. Enormous amounts of money will change hands if you score us highly. No, I didn't really say that. And whilst we're waiting for the poll results to come in, just to remind you, our next coffee break session will be at the end of July. That's the 29th of July, the last Wednesday in July, probably around the same time, but we'll obviously confirm that for you when we get closer to it. So the poll is, oh gosh, the poll is looking rather good, actually. I'm going to keep it on for just a couple more seconds and say thank you very, very much indeed to Vikram and to Payal and to everybody else involved, and Emily, in organising this. And thank you especially to all of you as the audience. So I'll end the poll so you can see the results. There we go. And generally speaking, I think we were happy with that. Thank you very much indeed, everybody, for your contributions and for your time and attention. And we look forward to seeing you on the 29th of July. Don't forget to fill in the survey. Thanks, everybody. Bye for now.
Bye. Bye.